welcome to the Motleyverse Booktube, where I discuss with you a book that I am currently reading or recently read. I share with you a brief synopsis of the book, what I liked about it. If there's any constructive criticism, I'll share. It is my hope that you're inspired to either pick up this book or another book of interest to you. So without further ado, let's start the show. I have to tell you before we continue, there might be some video noises in the background. My son is watching some videos, and that's the only way I can get him to kind of be calm while I get through this. So bear with me. But it gives it a much more natural vibe, because if you're my friend, chances are if you call me, this is the kind of noise that you hear in the background. Actually, this is a rather pleasant background noise. So first of all, let's talk about the title. The book that we're reading today is Arrow of God by Chinua Achebe. And this is his second installation of his African trilogy. This was set somewhere around in the earlier 20th century, like in the 1916s. Chinua himself was born in 1930. So, even though he did not live, he was not alive in the time that he's writing, I trust that he probably heard a lot of stories from people older than him, his relatives, his family, friends, that we can trust his account of this time. So that's one of the reasons why I think this is a very good book to read, especially if you are from the Southeast Nigeria. It's just a way of you to get familiar with some of the history that we have lost. So that's a plug to read this book. So The Arrow of God is a book that is following Ezulu. Ezulu is the chief priest of Umaro. Umaro is a collection of 6 villages, and one of their deity, one of their gods, is Olo. Ezulu is the chief priest. He's the one who communicates or who intercedes or who is the conduit between the god Olo and his people. So as a result, there's some responsibilities that he has, as well as some powers, so he is, even though he's man, he's a human being, he has some, he's revered when he becomes his godlike form. And so the book starts off with, there are many characters, but like I said, Ezulu is our main one. And he is, not only is he a chief priest, he's also a father. And he is a husband. He has 3 wives. His first wife is dead. His second wife is Matefi. I don't remember the third wife, but that's his favorite. That's just a by the way. So right from the beginning, we have a couple of storms brewing right from the back. The first one is that Umaro is at odds with Okwiri, which is another village, over land. Some people in Umaro believe that land belonged to them, and that Okwiri people were just taking care of it in the meantime, but it's theirs. Okwiri people thought that was their land, or maybe it was vice versa. But so we already have that war. Ezulu, whose mother is from Okwiri, believed that land was not theirs. Even though he was from Umaro, he told his clansmen that this is not our land, we're not going to go fight over this land, this does not belong to us, it's theirs. So we already have these storms brewing between the 2 villages, but in particular between Ezulu and his clansmen. They are already at odds with one another. They went ahead and went to that war, and they lost that war, but they lost that war because of Captain Winterbottom, the white man who was representing the British in that area. He came and kind of took control of the situation, stopped the war, broke all the guns, and took them to court. And at court, he felt that Ezulu was the only person who was credible and of integrity, and was the only person who would tell the truth. So him saying that also deepened the divide between Ezulu and his clanspeople. It kind of helped the enmity between them brew more. So we have that going on. So now they're looking at him kind of sideways, and he's looking at them sideways. He's looking at them upset that it had to be a white man, somebody from the outside, to come and tell you guys what should be. And they're looking at him like, okay, so you're siding with the ops, so we don't like you. So that's That's one of the wars. We also have Ezulu is also in some way at war within himself. He is trying to come to terms with the extent of his power. What can he do? What can he really do as the chief priest? One of his responsibilities is to mark the passage of time. Whenever a new moon comes up, he marks, or he vocalizes that, hey, there's a new moon. And with that vocalization that he does, everybody kind of agrees that that's what it's a new moon. If he doesn't do that, technically, we have not time, we don't recognize, or they don't recognize that the time has actually passed. So he was in the beginning, you see him thinking about, okay, well, what if I don't do that, and a part of him says, well, you can't do that. Nobody has ever done that. Nobody dares to do that. And he gets mad that who dares me or Olo on what they should do or what they can't do. So you see him dealing with, what can I do in this position? He also is at odds with his past. His mother had mental illness and actually ran mad. And it's one of the things that actually frightens him. As a little boy, he had to deal with that. And it affected him somewhere deep in his psyche. So you see him running away from that, or not wanting to remember that. It reminded me of Okonkwo in Things Fall Apart, who was not proud of his father, and he too was running away from his own family and personal history. So we have that going on. And also, Ezulu is just a cantankerous man. He's just a very disagreeable man. You see him, he's just always fighting with somebody, his neighbors, his children, his wife. He has one son that is close to him. Not one. He has a couple of sons that his last son, he thinks that one's going to be the chief priest, and then his other son, Obika, is probably his favorite and supposedly kind of looks like him, but he's a little bit too crazy, too rambunctious. But the point is that Ezulu seems to be a very disagreeable character. A lot of people are at odds with him in general. So we have all these stories, all these battles going on, and the book follows the trajectory of things and how they resolve or how they play out. Another battle that is going on is Captain Winterbottom, that white man that I told you that was overseeing things in that area and was reporting back to the British. He was also at odds within himself and with the British, because he felt like the way that they wanted to govern, some of the things that they wanted to institute, he was on ground, and he knew that, or he felt like they were not realistic, or they were not something that were worthy of pursuit. And one of them was to install a warrant chief. And the role of this warrant chief was to be, again, kind of like an antecedent. What Ezulu was for the chief priest, what Ezulu was for Olo is in a way what the warrant chief was supposed to be, somebody who communicated between the British and the people. Whatever the British wanted, he was supposed to pass the message along, and vice versa. And Captain Winterbottom didn't want that, but he felt like if he had to do that, the person that he would make that would be that one guy that he remembered from the war who spoke the truth, which was the chief priest. So he decided that the chief priest was going to be the person that he instituted. So he sent for him. So the book kind of follows all these things. What happens when he sends for him? If Ezulu, as disagreeable as he is, was not with that program. He had his other things. He had his own agenda that he wanted to see to fruition, and we watch it all unfold. At the end of the day, without giving too much spoiler, when Ezulu went to Okweri, which is where Captain Winterbottom and his people were stationed, when he went over there to answer their call and told them, no, I don't want to be your warrant chief, they put him in prison. And so while he was in prison, he was not announcing the new moon. But he said, you know what? This works for me. This works. This goes with what I want, you know? So his plan is he's not going to announce the new moon. When he comes back, he's not going to acknowledge the passage of the time that when he wasn't there. But as you all know, life does not wait for anybody. It certainly doesn't wait for a Zulu to declare that life is happening. And so the seasons continue. And what happened is when it was time to plant, to harvest, because he had not declared or said certain things, the people couldn't harvest their lands. They couldn't harvest what they had planted, and they were really upset about that. They were so angry about that, and so many things happened as a result of this. And at the end of the day, Ezulu lost that war. He lost it. He lost it with his people. He lost it with the white man. He lost it within himself. He lost that battle. And at the end of it, he actually ran mad, and one of his children died. And okay, so we are now in the section where I talk to you about what I learned about the book, or we delve in a little bit deeper about particulars in the book. What I've always wondered, and what this book answered for me, I had this question about Things Fall Apart, and that is, if the white man never came, if colonial rule never arrived in Africa, would we have by ourselves gotten rid of certain things about our culture that were probably not the most humane? For example, throwing away twins or human sacrifice. You know, when the white man arrived, his presence kind of expedited the process of putting an end to that. But without him, would we have done it? It's hard to say, right? Because we have nothing to, it's hard to say, right? But in this book, I felt like I got a little bit of an answer from it. Because in this book, when Ezulu refused to declare the seasons, the titled men approached him, Ezulu, and said, hey, we need you to go talk to Olo. What can we do about this? We need to resolve this. Do we need to do a well, not necessarily. We need to resolve this. We need you to talk to him. What do we need to do? Do we need to do a sacrifice? What do we need to do? Because this is not favoring us. This is not working. And what I got from that is that the people, when it comes to the battle between the state and the people, and in this situation, the state was the gods and their rules and what they had established. When it came between the battle between the state and the people could push back. They did push back. They told Olo, we don't want this. Can we go talk to Olo and see what we can do to rectify the situation? But what that told me is that yes, the people had the ability and also knew that they could push back against things that they didn't understand. So perhaps, the presence of the white man expedited it, but I imagine that we, with that ability, with that awareness, that at some point, yes, we would have pushed back. We would have asked questions, just like they did here. At some point, somebody would have pushed back against the gods and say, hey, this doesn't make sense. What can we do to change this? So that's one of the questions that this answered for me. Also, this book was sadder for me. It was sadder for me because in the trilogies, the main characters always meet with a very tragic end. But this particular end was really, really sad for me. It was really sad because at the end of the day, Ezulu runs mad. The one thing that he was afraid of, in fact, he had a vision where he saw his house deserted. And he heard a voice singing, like his mother's voice. His mother was a singer, but she was singing in the voice that she would sing when she was having one of her madness spells. And he woke up afraid. He woke up very frightened. And when he woke up, he was shaken up by this. It's like I told you in the beginning, one of the things that he's battling with is his own personal and family history. So it's sad that he eventually lost his mind. He was heartbroken. His spirit was broken. He lost his son in the fight, in the battle between all these wars that were brewing. At some point, he lost his son, and he couldn't believe. He felt like he was acting within the full scope of his role as the chief priest, and he felt like he was protected in the things that he was doing. So he just couldn't believe that after doing all this, that Olu allowed his son to die. His heart was broken, his spirit was decimated, and he just couldn't take it. And at the end of the day, he lost his mind. And you could tell he was about to lose his mind, because when his people were coming over to pay condolences, he was sweeping outside his compound. Now, if you know anything about the Igbo culture, you know that there is no man, okay, who is the chief priest. You don't even have to be the chief priest, but a man, a husband with family, who is sweeping the compound at this particular time. It's unlikely. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but it's unlikely. In fact, earlier in the book, you see that Ezolu came when Obika, the son, when Obika got married. The morning after his wedding, everybody's super excited. Everybody wants to go to the stream, including the person who was supposed to sweep up the compound for him, or sweep up his hut. So he comes out annoyed, like, where is the person that's supposed to sweep my hut? So I mean, so give me a minute, okay? And he comes out upset about this. So he's not interested in sweeping. So for him to be sweeping when people are coming and to pay him condolences, and somebody had to come take the broom from him, I was like, oh no, this is not a good sign. This is not a good sign. And it kind of let us know that he was breaking with reality, which is what ultimately happened. So I think it was so sad that one thing that he was afraid of happened to him. And another sad thing about this is, like, these men in these trilogies were just not ordinary men. They were all leaders, visionaries. They were people they were men that the people around them looked towards for guidance, for what to do, for support, emotional and physical support. And so when these men are lost, it leaves a vacuum, not only in their families, but in the community and perhaps history. Because these were the men who were not very willing to compromise with the new ways that were coming in. And it's sad and tragic that we lost them, and who knows what history would have been like if men like Okonkwo and men like Ezolu survived. Who knows? I also think that they're always, Okonkwo positioned these men with a very good friend of theirs, who was more acquiescent to the new ways, to the things that the white men were bringing, who was more willing to contemplate these new ways. Those people survived. Those people fared better. And perhaps that tells a lot of what became of us and our future and how things played out. The ones that were willing to push back they didn't survive to tell that story. So another thing that was sad about it is that the white men that these people encountered, who ultimately led to their demise, didn't even as much as notice when they were gone. They didn't care, let alone feel a little bit of sadness. It was just like a speck of dust landed on their shirt, and they just kind of dusted it off. Even that, it may not even have elicited that much of a response for them. Yet these were men who were the pillars of their community, and you fell them down from your interaction with them, and you don't even notice. You don't notice. In Okonkwo, when Okonkwo dies, his friend Obirika tells the man that was writing the book, the white man, like, this was a great man, and here he is. He has committed suicide. We can't even bury him. Look what he brought him down to. Didn't even care. Same thing here. The man, Captain Winterbottom, who sent for this Ezolu, to come to be this chief priest, didn't even notice or care what happened or became of him. He just didn't care, you know. And so that was very, very sad for me. You know, there was no regard for these men, and there was no regard for what their presence in these men's life had resulted to. And perhaps that's what's going on now too. Is there regard for what's going on in Africa? Just curious. Is there anything I didn't like about this book? No, I thoroughly enjoyed this book. This was my favorite of the trilogies. The only thing I would have liked was to see a continuation of how things played out, but that's not necessary. In fact, I think the lack of continuation tells us everything, you know. With the death of Ezolo, I can only imagine what became of his family. As Chinua said in the book, the only good thing about him running mad is that he was spared. He was spared from having to see things play out in the way that he didn't want it to play out. So friends, that's the end of this episode of the Motleyverse Booktube. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope I kept you somewhat entertained. This is a work in progress. We're gonna work it all out. Okay. Thank you so much, and everybody have a great day.